Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we're in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Lynn Nesbitt, and I'm chairing today's panel. Joining me on the panel via Zoom are Ron Merritt and Linda Schultz. Our assessors today are Mackenzie Omachinsky and Matthew Barocas, and our administrative personnel is Zachary Mohan. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony, followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the Board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We will be hearing items 1 through 7 on our docket today. Mr. Mohan, please affirm the assessor's and applicant's testimony.
Of course, Madam Chair. I will start with you, Mr. Omachinsky. Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Mackenzie Omachinsky.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. And Mr. Barocas, please state your full name.
Matthew Barocas.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. As applicant, please stand. Please state your full name.
Barricades.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And before we begin, are there any issues, preliminary issues we need to raise or discuss? Nothing?
Nope.
Great, thank you. Then let's get at it. I would note that we have a fairly heavy agenda this morning. We have some timelines we'd like to finish. We will finish today, so we're going to go right through no matter how long it takes. So let's get started on item number 1, file number 24-3314, 15 Cooperstown Road. Mr. Omachinsky, when you are ready, please.
Okay, thank you. So this is file number 24-3314, roll number 0309162630. The address is 15 Cooperstown Road. The roll year is 2025, reference date April 1st, 2023. The assessed value is $40,297,000 for the classification 20 and $4,710,000 for classification 60, for a total assessed value of $45,007,000. The number of buildings is 2. There's 6 stories. The effective year and actual year built is 2020. There's 149 suites with 132 indoor parking spots and 97 outdoor parking spots. I'll move to the next page for subject sale history. August 26th, 2019, there was a sale for $1,870,000. We'll move to page 3. The number of units, there is 47 one-bedroom units, 82 two-bedroom units, 20 three-bedroom units, for a total of 149 units. The average monthly rent per unit is $1,821.25. The gross potential rent for the classification 20T is $3,256,395. The vacancy rate is 3.1%. The expense rate is 39.34%. The net operating income is $1,914,094. The capitalization rate is 4.75%. The estimated market value rounded is $40,297,000. And the market value per suite is $270,449.66. Excuse me. Then there's also the workup for the 60 dental and medical office and the office space as well. Then we'll go to the next page. This is the information for the market income for apartment, office, dental, medical, and then the office 1 to 2 story plus 3 sub. Then we'll go to page 5 where we have the rent comparables. All the comparables are Res App apartment. The effective year built ranges from 2016 to 2020 for the comparables. The total number of units range from 74 to 239 units. And then there are no bachelor units for any of the comparables. For 1 bedroom, we have 20 to 155 for the range. 2 bedroom, we have 31 to 95. And 3 bedroom, we have 24 to 0. And 4, we have 0 to 2. Then the average monthly rent for the comparables range from $1,534 to $1,627. Go to the following page, to page 6. This is information from the Winnipeg Regional Real Estate Board. It's the Winnipeg multifamily top sales transactions. We're looking at the price per unit for these 3 sales at $283,648 for Lumen South Point, $269,930 for Urban Square, and $265,740 for UC30. We'll go on to page 7 for the comparable leases. Here we have like an averaged leased area of 1,023 to 1,264 square feet. So the average year built for these comparables are 2017 to 2021. And then the net rent per square foot ranges from $32 to $34.22. We'll go on to page 8. This is the capitalization rates information. And then on to page 9, there is our capitalization rate evidence. The following is a sample of actual sales that took place during the reference period. The purpose for showing these individual capitalization rates is to illustrate the accuracy of the model and substantiate the model-derived capitalization rates. They are not meant to be comparable specific to the subject property. We'll go to page 10. This is the municipal excerpts, sorry. And then page 11, we have a permit. The issue date was September 4th, 2020. It's to construct a new 6-story building with 149 apartments and underground parkade. The total construction value is $4,250,000. And then if you go to page 12, we have some photos of the property itself. It's some exterior and interior, and that goes till page 16. And then after 16, we have the annual income statement. So that'll be 17 to 20. And then after that, we have the rent roll for the property from 20 to 23. And that is our evidence. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Omachinski. Ms. Cates, do you have questions for the assessor?
Just a few, thank you. So on page 4, in regard to the potential rent for the apartment side, would you agree that the model rent appears to be overshot when you compare it to the financial statements you've provided at the end of your brief in terms of the rent they were able to collect for the property?
One moment here. 22 versus 33. So yeah, that's something that we looked at. There's 149 units in this building. The building only got interim occupancy for 60 units in November of 2021. So they were still in the lease-up phase at that time. So that's why we weren't weighing the actuals, because what the actuals are showing on page 17 is basically a reflection of a property that's just ramping up.
Okay. So on page 5 with the rent comps, the rental rates shown here are not contemplating rental discounts, is that correct?
They ought to be, yeah.
But if they weren't, then that would be inflating the rents quite a bit, would it not?
Yeah, but when we do that, the process is to remove the discounts, because that is something that it would inflate the rents, yeah.
Then turning to page 8, the cap rate table, with the range 4.75 to 5.45 for the apartments, do you have any information on how many sales are used to achieve that range or the location of those properties?
We don't. I know we have one sale for newer buildings on 2390 Pembina, or 2390 McPhillips, that I'm sure we're all sick of hearing at this point in our rebuttal. But other than that one, off the top of my head, for newer builds, I'm not sure.
And then in terms of your cap rate sales on page 9, have you provided any of the workups as part of your direct evidence?
I have not.
Okay, thank you. That would conclude my questions for this property.
Thank you, Ms. Cates. Mr. Merritt, questions for the assessor?
Thank you. Mr. Assessor, I've noted that on the apartment, you're using a cap rate, not a cap rate, but a vacancy rate of 3.1. Seeing that this is a new building, which was built in 2020, the vacancy rate normally would be higher, but you talked about the tenant inducements or discounts. What are your thoughts in regards to the vacancy rate of 3.1?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a large building. Like I mentioned, it only got interim occupancy in November of 2021. Discounts are something that we see often, like when new apartments are built. What you'll see is they might advertise like 1 month free rent to try and get the thing up and going, up and running, get that income stream at full capacity as soon as they can. However, a building of this size, you know, and apartments in general, they're not short-term investments. So the vendor isn't going to let it go. They're not going to negotiate a price on a temporarily inflated vacancy rate via the ramp-up lease-up period. So, you know, we're valuing it on a long-term basis. We use market vacancy rate on it.
Thank you. So the cap rate for the apartment building is 4.75. Is that the lowest for a brand new building that you would use on an apartment?
No, I have seen lower than that. It kind of depends on the age, area, and size. But we do have very strong support for that cap via 2390 McPhillips on a site-specific basis.
Was that the Lady Joy building?
Yeah, that's the one.
That's all the questions I have. I thank you very kindly. Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Merritt. Ms. Schultz, any questions for the assessor?
Just one. So based on your market rent that you're using of the 1821, do you feel that when you look at your rent roll, the actuals versus the market, the actual rents that you're receiving on these properties are considerably lower than what you're using as an average? Are you using that because you're discounting? Well, no, yours is higher actually. You're using even if I look at the market rents, seem to be considerably higher than what they're actually receiving on the property.
Oh, in terms of like the rent roll at the bottom,
Yeah,
the
page
end of
20
the-
on. Yeah, starting at page 20.
Yeah, I mean, there's some that are like even higher. There's some that are 2000, several in the 1848 range, and that's even before you add parking. So, our rent here is sorry, flipping around. It's what? 1821. So I mean, it looks like we're right in that ballpark, and that's why the income statement can look misleading when you look at what they actually collected, because they're very clearly still ramping up. So I think we're pretty solid on those rents. Also, the overall valuation is 270 a unit, which might jump out as looking like it's on the higher side, but it is supported. When you go to page 6, you can see that there's 3 new buildings, and the first building immediately is a townhouse, so I wouldn't put weight on that. The Lumen at South Point, but Urban Square and UC 30, you know, they're around that 270 range. So I feel we got this one. Feel strongly we got this one correctly done.
Okay, no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just with respect to the expense ratio, 39.34, would you consider that to be normal for a new build? Is it low? What is, in your experience, for a new build like this? What would be an expense ratio that's reasonable?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is reasonable. This is something that the model, this is like right in the ballpark that the model has applied. Often what we'll see is apartments, they often even come in their first couple of years lower than this, but we had lower than around 40%. But a purchaser would understand that they kind of have like a little bit of an expense holiday after the building is completed, because everything's brand new, right? And then going forward as a long-term investment, they're going to expect more bills coming down the pipeline. So this amount here, we're at 39, is consistent with what we see on the going forward basis in terms of income and expense mailers that we get.
Okay, and typically, I mean, you talked about expense holiday. I put that in quotation marks. How long is that period? Just generally.
Before things start wearing out.
Yeah.
Windows get broken, you know, electrical, mechanical systems have to be replaced.
So 5 years.
Yeah.
Ish.
I'd say at least maybe even earlier than that.
Okay.
Honestly,
Okay.
it's from what they report to us, the expenses start going up. But I mean, in the first year or two, they're usually too low.
Okay.
So we're a bit higher.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I have no additional questions for the assessors. Ms. Cates.
Thank you. So if you turn to page 2 of my brief, we've summarized some of the facts of the property. As well, we have our requested assessment. So we're not contesting the commercial stream at $4,710,000. We are contesting the class code 20, the residential, and our requested assessment on that portion is $34,857,000. So if you go to page 6, we have some site maps. So we have an aerial map view of the parcel, as well as a Google map view showing the approximate location. And then some exterior photographs to follow on page 7. On page 9, we have our property description. The subject property is located on the west side of Center Street between intersections with Cooperstown Road and Park West Drive in the Bridgewater Center area. The property is a 6-story apartment built in 2021. And the assessor covered the suite mix, so I'll just skip ahead. So if you turn to page 14, we have the overview of our income approach. So we are disputing the rents that the assessor is applying to this property. What we've done is we've taken a look at the actuals and then compared it as well to CMHC rents to make sure that they were in line with each other. So when we work up the CMHC rents based on the suite mix, based on the 2005 plus category, we get a potential rent for this property of $2,796,000. But what I've done is I've taken a look at the January 2023 rent roll, and those potential market gross rents were indicating $3,160,824, with the actual rent achieved at year end 2022 in the 2.8 million range. We are going to apply a market vacancy rate of 3.1%. Expenses, we're applying an expense allowance of $1,291,845, or 42.6% of EGI, based on a look at the 2022 expenses for the property. On page 15, we have our cap rate for the subject. So we are applying a cap rate of 5%. 5% is our base cap rate for new apartments. We know the property has typical amenities of new builds, has sufficient parking, and we feel confident at 5% for the property. So if you turn to page 17, we have our valuation workup. So what we've done here, so when we take a look at the rent roll, they report a potential rent of that $3.1 million value. And then that discrepancy between the actual rent, that actual rent is in the 2.8 million range. The 0123 rent roll also states a vacancy of 164,808. So the difference between those values would imply discounts in the $100,000, $200,000 range. So what I've done for the potential market gross rents is I've used the potential from the rent roll and taken out the discounts as would be done. We've also added in additional income in the form of parking and miscellaneous income. The expenses here include repair and maintenance of $916 per unit. And so our NOI is $1,742,850. I think at this point, if I could turn to our independent document, the cap rate study, just to briefly go through it once and then cover it for the rest of the properties today.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so if you open up the separate cap rate study document.
Okay, give us a minute to do that.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So on page 2 of the cap rate, toward the top, it talks about to get to a cap rate to convert a single year's income expectancy. So stabilizing the financials into a single year. So it doesn't necessarily mean that multiple years have to be stabilized, but you stabilize into a single year. And then toward the bottom of the page, it discusses that the cap rate is influenced by 3 major items, those being perceived risk of the income, investor expectations for appreciation, and required returns from other vehicles. So if you turn to page 4 toward the top, it discusses principle of anticipation in terms of calculating cap rates. So the idea is to get into the mind of the purchaser and the income opportunity that they would have been purchasing. Sometimes this can differ from the historical, and that's something that we've taken into account in our cap rate calculations to make sure that our valuations are properly stabilized. If you turn to page 6 toward the top, we have an overview from the valuation manual. So while most of the cap rates are between 4.75 to 5.45, the entirety of the range is quite a bit larger. And then we also have some information from the brokers. So Collier is suggesting a range of 5 to 6, Cushman kind of 4.75 to 5.5, and then CBRE is a bit more optimistic, but we're not seeing that much compression overall. And the compression would be considered for the best of the best stock, likely concrete construction, underground parking, etc. So on page 7, there's a bit of a discussion on interest rates. The main takeaway here is that at the reference date of April 1, 2023, which we're using that date to come up with apartment valuations, the same investor could get a low risk government bond for 4.5%. So given that real estate is a moderate to high risk investment, and we're using that same date for the valuations of our properties today, I would stress caution with when the city's showing cap rates that are 4.5% and below. On page 10, we have some discussion on the factors that we may consider for adjustment. So these are site specific. I believe we've only done adjustments on one property or 2 properties today. And then page 12, we have our cap rate sales. So these are based on our stabilizations, and we have a range of 5.26% to 7.11% with all of the workups provided to follow. So I'll just return to the main brief just to tie up the presentation here. So just back to the main brief on page 17. Again, we are using an NOI of $1,742,850 with a 5% cap rate, gives an indicated value of $34,857,000 rounded. The income approach is the best method for coming up with a value for the subject. So in terms of using per unit sale prices of other properties and trying to apply it to this one, given that we're not doing direct comparison, I feel that approach is not as accurate and the income approach should be given priority. Then on the appendix, starting on page 21, I've included some marketing photos as well as the financials that I've looked at for the property. And then I would also have some rebuttal to present on the city's cap rates when that time comes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cates. Mr. Omachinsky, Mr. Barocas, do you have questions for the applicant?
Yes, please. We also have our cap rate rebuttal, which we'll go through quickly.
Okay, so first we'll deal with the direct evidence, then we'll deal with Ms. Cates's rebuttal, and then your rebuttal.
Yeah, thank you. So on page 17, it looks like we have there's a difference in our income here. When we're looking at the column for pay for 2022, would you agree that the figure for parking would be lower based on than it would be on a long-term basis, based on the fact that it was still leasing up during that time?
It could be lower at that time. Yeah, that was what was on the statement. So I've just applied that in the analysis.
Okay. And then would you agree that this property, it's in Bridgewater Forest, right?
Yeah, it's around Bridgewater, might be in a different Bridgewater, but yeah.
Would you consider Bridgewater Forest and Bridgewater Center an attractive place for owning a rental property?
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of new development around there in terms of multifamily. It would probably be a desirable location for tenants, so yeah, I would consider the area to be desirable.
You think it'd be more or less desirable than a property next to a Walmart, North McPhillips?
In terms of owning,
In terms of owning, in terms of potential tenant strength and ability to push the rents?
well, it's a bit hard to say. Bridgewater, there's a lot of more competition in terms of new builds, whereas when you're looking toward an area like McPhillips, Garden City, it's a lot of older apartment stock around there. So at the time of McPhillips, that was one of the only new apartments in that area, so that might have been more desirable to own.
Okay, I think that's it for our questions now. Let me just double check. Yeah, we'll just present our rebuttal after the panel asks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Schultz, do you have questions for the applicant?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Merritt.
Thank you. Ms. Schultz, pardon me, Ms. Cates, you get a chance to go through this building at all?
I did not inspect this property. I believe another member of my office did at a previous time, which is how we got the picture of the parkade on page 8, but I didn't have the opportunity to inspect.
But this is your workup though, is it not?
Yeah, like this is my brief and my submission, but I didn't personally inspect, but I believe I pulled this photo from a prior brief, so I believe that the person who handled that brief did go visit it.
And you feel as if the cap rate should be 5% compared to the city's 4 3/4?
Yeah, our position is that 5% should be the base cap rate. In contrast, last cycle, we were looking at a 5.25 base, so come down a bit, but we believe 5% should be the floor for the cap rates for new builds. Potentially could go a bit lower for the top of the line.
You talk about my notes here. Your gross is 2,982,216, and you talk about some discounts in there of $178,608. What is that all about?
Typically, to get tenants in, you might have to offer rental discounts, especially when there's a lot of supply of newer builds. So it's pretty common across newer apartments, which is why I was asking the assessors earlier in terms of their questioning in regard to if they had taken out the discounts from those rent comps, because it is pretty common to see quite significant discounts for the newer apartment stock. So typically would probably be like free rent.
All right. So your code 60s, you agree with the city of Winnipeg?
Yeah, we're not disputing the code 60.
And the difference between the city and yours evaluation for the apartment building is approximately $5 million.
Yes.
All right. I thank you, Madam Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have no questions. So Ms. Cates, you have rebuttal evidence. So give us a minute for our
I didn't know this
for
one.
Mr. Mohan to distribute it.
I have that. Just gotta send it to our assessors at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
And sorry, panel, you're all able to see it in the SharePoint? You might have to refresh, but aside from that, it should be uploaded.
Yes, I have it.
I
Yeah.
haven't.
Okay?
Yep.
Perfect.
And do our assessors have it?
Am I good to begin?
Let's just confirm that the assessors have your rebuttal. Yes, you have it?
Yeah, we have it. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead then, Miss Cates.
Okay, thank you. So if you turn to page 2 of the rebuttal, we start with an overview of the city's cap rate sales. So they're indicating a range of 3.46% to 5.74%. And again, I would just echo the comments that cap rates that are on the very, very low end, 4.5% and lower, should be taken with extreme caution. We don't believe they're appropriate to use for valuing real estate at our specific reference date based on the interest rate environment. If you turn to page 4, in looking at cap rates 727 Sargent and 241 Young, these are the a couple of the unusually low cap rates, and typically when we see cap rates at that level, it's indicative that the purchaser is purchasing a different income opportunity. I guess 3.46% and 4.21% are just they're just below what we would expect to see. 459 Sargent, the city has used the historical income in their cap rate stabilization. Even though the information that would have been available to the purchaser in terms of the broker information would indicate a rent that was higher, they indicated that they could expect a rent of $740 per unit per month, along with parking rent of $40 per stall. So what we've done, if you turn to page 5, we have our stabilization. So when we restabilize based on the income that the purchaser would expect to attain, we get a cap rate of 5.79%. And while I would say that sometimes the brokers may want to paint a more positive picture, typically it would be more in terms of the expenses rather than the income, and there would still have to be a foundation for what they're saying. They can't completely go off track with the rents that they could expect to get. And these expenses that we have, these aren't from the broker information. When the city had previously had rebuttal to our cap rates, they had listed these expenses, so that's what we have used. And then we have the MLS listing to follow. Page 7, 150 Hendon, the city has a cap rate of 4.01%. And although I haven't seen the stabilization for that one, based on the information we had on file, I would presume that it's based again on the historical income. So for this property, we had the opportunity to interview the purchaser, and they indicated that at their time of purchase, the vendor had advised them that they had applied for RTV increases to get above guideline rents. So the property went through land titles June 2nd, 2021. And at the year end of 2021, the purchaser indicated to the city in the INE mailers that they expected a gross potential rent of $712,182. And then to further, in 2022, after they've been operating it for a full year, they indicated that they actually achieved a rent pretty close to that, which further supports the idea that they were purchasing a different income opportunity. So if you turn to page 8, you can see that stabilization, and that works out to a 5.42% cap rate, which makes more sense for a property of this age and type. And then we have the RTV orders and some of the other information to follow. If you turn now to page 22. So the city cap rate 677 Maryland. This is a sale we both use, but we use the more recent sale. They are using an older sale, even when a more recent sale of the property occurs, and it occurred fairly close to the reference date. 2390 McPhillips. Again, the property was purchased with below market rents. So it was purchased by a REIT. They would have been able to see that the rents were below market and there was an opportunity to be had there. When you compare with CMHC, you could see that. And then after the purchase, they did end up increasing those rents, which further supports that idea. And that would conclude my rebuttal presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cates. Mr. Omachinsky or Mr. Barocas, do you have questions for the applicant?
Yes, just a couple. Where does it say that a cap rate is indicative of a rate of return on a property for real estate? I thought it was just simply a reflection of the stabilized net operating income and the sale price.
Well, the cap rate, to put it simply, is reflecting the risk of the property. The idea is to reflect the risk to the income stream. So yeah, mathematically, you can have like that division is what it is, but in terms of what it means, it is measuring the risk.
But it's not like a rate of return though, right? Because like as the cap rate goes up, there's more risk. But then also the relative value based on a known NOI would go down. So like I don't see the connection between the GIC return rate and like a cap rate.
Yeah, to elaborate, the cap rates and the interest rates don't necessarily move one-to-one. I agree with that. The point of mentioning it is more so just to bring up the logical question that if the same person at the reference date that we're valuing all these properties on, if they could get a low risk government bond at 4.5%, then why would that same person invest in a higher risk asset of real estate for that same return? So it's not to say that they're moving one-to-one or they're the same thing at all. It's just more of a logical question of why would we use those low rates when our exercise is to use this April 1, 2023 valuation date to value all of these properties.
I understand that, and it's like, but maybe in our opinion, a cap rate is not a rate of return.
Yeah, and I don't believe I said that either.
Okay, fair enough. I'm not going to belabor the point. Okay, and just because we're dealing with mostly new today, I'm not going to go through the older properties. So I'll just kind of like put my questioning on 2390 McPhillips, which is your critique on, I believe it is page, sorry, I'm scrolling.
Page 22.
22, yeah, okay, thank you. You think 5.6 is a reasonable rate for a brand new apartment?
It would be on the high end. Typically, like I wouldn't be using a rate of 5.6 for doing the valuations. It's just to illustrate that the previous cap rate was not properly stabilized. And further, I mean, when we look at the pro forma NOI and what the actual sale price was, that would indicate a 5. So we're somewhere in that range.
Those are my questions for your rebuttal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Merritt, do you have questions on the rebuttal?
I have none, Madam Chairperson.
Thank you. Ms. Schultz, questions on the rebuttal?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. And neither do I. So Mr. Omachinsky or Mr. Barocas, you have rebuttal. So let's just give us a minute.
Yeah, because I don't have internet.
Oh, okay, I can print one out. Just a quick moment.
Okay.
Okay, I'm just gonna put us in a very quick recess due to procedure, but aside from that, I'll get the paper copy.
Awesome, thank you very much.
No problem.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, I'd like to call the meeting back to order. We were at the spot where the assessors were going to begin discussing their rebuttal evidence. So, Mr. Assessors, when you are ready, you may begin, please.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll be as brief as possible because I know based on the faces, we've all heard this before. So the newer ones, we're going to look at newer ones today. We're going to look at 2390 McPhillips. So if you follow us down to page 10, just so we're reading it in. We have the Altus workup on page 10. We have the city workup on page 11. The only real difference, other than the stabilized management at 5% of EGI, again, is the income. So Altus basically used the October 2020 CMHC income instead of the actual income in place. Because the people who purchased this property were able to raise the rents. But the expenses also went up as well significantly. So you can't a la carte increase the expenses without including, or rather the income without including the expenses. So when you look at our workup on page 11, when you use the actual effective gross income that was on the table at the time of negotiation that was available, and the expenses, you get a 4.7 cap rate. And this is 2390 McPhillips between a Walmart and a car dealership. Today we're talking about Bridgewater Forest, Bridgewater Center, all that new development out there. So I feel very strongly that our caps are solid. That's a rebuttal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brokus. Ms. Cates, do you have questions for the assessor on the rebuttal?
Yeah, maybe just a couple. So you mentioned that the expenses increased significantly, but did you provide any financials to show that?
Well, no, that would be all information that wouldn't have been available at the time of the sale. So I'm just simply saying that if we're going to consider income after the sale, we'd have to consider the expenses as well. And when you look at 21 in isolation, it actually stabilizes out to like 4.5. No, I don't have backup or anything for that. I'm saying that under oath. And I'm not taking that valuation. I'm just simply saying that based on the information at that point in time, it stabilizes to 4.7.
And Madam Chair, would you prefer that I just ask questions on what he verbally presented rather than some of the other text?
Well, the whole text is in evidence, so if you'd like to ask questions on it, you're free to.
Okay, just a couple then, I'll be brief. So just on the first page where you say 1 year of income is insufficient to stabilize, is there any appraisal guideline or IAAO standard that says that, or is that just the assessment department's opinion?
Well, I mean, like stabilizing kind of like by definition is you need like more than like 1 year because expenses fluctuate, right? So in order for, in our opinion, a property to kind of have the historical income and expense quality to draw conclusions off of for a cap rate, 1 year is insufficient. It's just 1 year and who knows what happened there.
Okay, but then when I look at your page 11 in your stabilization of McPhillips, most of these under notes, you're taking, even though it's 3-year stabilization, most of these you're just taking the most recent year. There's actually very few allowances that are like stabilized based on how you're describing. Would you agree with that?
I would not. The professional fees, the office supplies, the advertising, repair and maintenance, snow removal. Those are things that fluctuate. And then there's things like, you know, salaries and because utility rates escalate that where it's appropriate to take the most recent year. So It's a mix based on appropriateness. So maybe like the most recent year, if you only have one, you could get a partial stabilization on the expenses. But I should, some of these bigger ticket line items like repair and maintenance, I would need more than 1 year to get kind of a solid feel of it. So like I saw all those sales in your cap rate study, like when I was going through making our table, and I just didn't include them. I didn't include Maryland because the most recent sale of Maryland, because there's only 1 year of recent information. The older sale was better, so because it had multiple years. So I kept the older sale in it.
Okay, thank you. That would conclude my questions of the rebuttal.
Thank you very much. Ms. Schultz, questions on the assessor's rebuttal evidence?
Just one question on page 11. So you've got on your expenses, you have under management, so 2017, 18, 19, and actual averages anywhere in the 50s, but you've got your stabilized at 73,000. Comment on that?
Yeah, so
Big
and
jump.
it's 5% of effective gross income. I mean, that's something that it's kind of like the industry standard. I mean, that's how that's one thing that the city and the agents do agree upon is the percentage that we apply to the effective gross income for site-specific management. That's what that is.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt?
I have none, thank you.
Thank you. And I have no questions either on the rebuttal. Mr. Omachinsky, Mr. Barocas, summation?
Yeah, real quick. I mean, this is in Bridgewater Center. It's brand new. Its price per unit's in line with the other newer builds as per the market report. I think 4.7 cap is just fine. I think our value's solid. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cates?
I'm okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, that will conclude item number 1. And just a point, I'm assuming that rebuttal evidence will apply through the whole docket. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So we won't really need to go through it again unless
Hopefully not.
unless somebody wants to raise something different, please let me know and we'll make sure there's that opportunity. Okay, so we'll move on to item number 2. I note that on this one, there's a request for a non-co-op. So Mr. Barocas, Mr. Omachinsky, please introduce the property first, and then we will deal with the non-co-op piece first.
So yeah, get down to it. Okay, yeah. So file number 24-3199, roll number 0309-300-5505. The address is 2525 Pembina Highway. Roll year 2025, reference date April 1st, 2023, and the assessed value for a total of 79,832,000. And then there's one building, 16 stories. The actual and effective year built is 2020 to 2021. There's 368 suites, 41 indoor parking spots, and 76 outdoor parking spots. The recommendation, the assessor requests that the burden of proof be placed on the applicant for non-cooperation, section 553(3)B of the MAA, and reduction in assessment is ordered that it follow section 54(3.2) of the MAA. And then we'll go to page 11 for the evidence of delivery.
Just the registered mail showing that.
So this is just the registered mail showing that it had been delivered. Then we'll go to page 12.
Show that.
Yeah, so yeah, it was showing here on page 12, sorry, that it was delivered and the signature is available. Then we'll go to page 13, and this is the mailer for with the penalty describing for non-compliance. That's our evidence. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cates, questions?
No questions, but just a comment, if I may.
Go ahead.
So I investigated the penalty issue with the owner and, it was just an oversight on their end. So we're not disputing the request for the penalty today.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Merritt, questions for the assessors?
I don't think so. After Ms. Cates's acknowledgement that she's talked to the owner, so I'm okay with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Schultz?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. I have no questions either. We will have to go in camera for the panel to make its decisions. Mr. Mohan, can you put us in camera, please?
Of course, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. The panel has made its decision, and the assessor's request that the burden of proof be placed on the applicant for non-co-op is granted. So what that means, Ms. Cates, is the burden of proof shifts to you, and we will start with your presentation, please.
Okay, thank you very much. So if you turn to page 2 of my brief, again, we're not disputing the commercial class code 60 valuation of $1,873,000. We are disputing the class code 20 valuation. We're requesting an assessment, which I'm going to be revising as I move through. So I'll just read it out at the end, if that's okay.
Sure.
So if we skip ahead to page 6, we have the property site map. So aerial map and Google Map view. And then some exterior photos to follow on page 7 and 8. On page 9, we have a property description. The subject property is located at the southwest corner of the intersection of Pembina Highway and Bison Drive in the Fairfield Park area. The property consists of a 16-story purpose-built student residence structure, which was built in 2020. The site is about 1.2 acres. The property has a total of 368 units, which includes 196 one-bedroom units, 157 two-bedroom units, and 15 four-bedroom units. The units are very small in size. They range from 283 square feet to 337 square feet for a one-bedroom, 371 to 589 square feet for a two-bedroom, and 1350 square feet for a four-bedroom. We note that the four-bedroom units have a living room space and the one-bedroom units only have a two-burner cooktop. There are 41 indoor parking stalls and 76 surface parking stalls noted, and the property also contains main floor retail space. And I would just comment that on the size, when we compare this to other new developments, typically you'd have a one-bedroom on the small end be 600 to 700 square feet. So these are extremely small and they're more equivalent to bachelor units rather than one bedroom, two bedroom, etc. So if you turn to page 14, we have our income approach. So we are disputing the assessor's potential market gross rents of $6,650,187 or $1,506 per unit per month. So with this property, given that it functions as a student residence, their financials and their budget items go on a per bed basis rather than a per unit basis. And additionally, the units are all furnished. So in terms of trying to draw rents from the actual financials, it's a bit difficult. Typically, if we had a property that had furnished units, but they also had unfurnished units, then we can make a comparison of what the market rent for those furnished units should be. But in this case, where they all come furnished, they're all on a per bed basis, it's a bit challenging to break out what would that actual market rent be. So we're looking to CMHC. And when we're looking at rents that properties can attain, typically rents are going to be determined largely by suite size and suite finishes. So when we're looking at the sizes here, the idea that the average rent of $1,506 per unit can be achieved when they're mostly in the range of 300, 400 square feet, I mean, someone would choose to live elsewhere for the same price. If you could get a standard market unit, that's 700 square feet for the same rent, all else equal, you wouldn't choose to live here. So that kind of introduces the logic that I've applied for the rents. I'm using what the subject considers a 1-bedroom. I'm using CMHC bachelor rents, and what the subject considers a 2-bedroom. I'm using CMHC 1-bedroom rents to get at the size. The 4-bedroom just falls into the 3-bedroom plus category, as stated. So based on this method, we're using potential market gross rents of $5,200,320 or $11.78 per unit per month. In terms of the piece that I mentioned that I would be adjusting during the presentation, in my initial submission, I hadn't accounted for the extra income, so I'm going to do that verbally. So just to state it for the record, so in terms of laundry, I'm assuming income from laundry of $59,280. That's 59280, and that's based on an estimate of $2 per load times 570 beds times once per week. And then for parking, I am going to be using income of $84,960. That's 84960. That's assuming 41 indoor stalls at $80 per month per stall, and 76 outdoor stalls at $50 per stall per month. So I'll just direct. Whoops. So if you turn to page 16, this is our cap rate overview for the subject property. So the base cap rate for a new property, we would start at 5%. And when we're looking at this specific property, we note that in terms of durability and quality of income, this is student housing, and based on conversations with the owner, the residents are primarily international students, about 70%. So this can create a risk to the income stream if there's other conditions at play that would create a situation where they aren't able to rent. So for example, like when we're looking at a property like this, it's extremely susceptible to external factors, government policy, university enrollment, etc. And then additionally, in terms of size, we consider an adjustment for that because they are very small. So if you turn to page 18, this is the original valuation workup, but I'll just read off the new figures just for the record. So we're using potential market gross rents, $5,200,320. That's $11.78 per unit per month. Vacancy at 3.1%. And with the other forms of income, we have an effective gross income of $5,183,350. We are using a market expense ratio of 41.9% as assessed. That works out to $2,173,379. So our NOI is $3,009,972. So that's $3,009,972 at a 5.5% cap rate, gives an indicated value of $54,727,000 rounded. So again, that's $54,727,000 rounded for the request for the residential component. And we are not disputing the commercial component. The appendix starts on page 21 of the brief, and I just included some floor plans and some marketing photos. And that would conclude my presentation for this property. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Cates. Mr. Omachinsky, Mr. Brokus, questions for Ms. Cates?
Yeah, just a couple. Are you assessing this as a student housing complex or like a regular market apartment?
We're assessing it as if it were a market apartment, but similarly to when you're looking at like social housing, you would still consider the durability and quality of income and external factors of how that property is run. But we're valuing it as market based on using market parameters for rent, expenses, vacancy.
Okay. So in your opinion, the purpose-built student housing structure, it's highest and best use, maximal financial profitability is not as a student housing, but as a market apartment.
Wait, can you rephrase that?
Sorry, so is it you're saying it's more maximally profitable to be an open market apartment than it is a student housing?
Well, typically when we're doing the valuations, neither of us is doing a very in-depth highest and best use analysis. So we're valuing it as is, but in terms of putting a valuation to it, you would use market parameters for the NOI factors.
Okay, and then on page 16, you've added 0.5 to the cap rate, citing student housing and government policy and university enrollment. Would those, whereby you're valuing it as a market apartment, would those factors not disappear?
I don't believe so, because even as a market apartment, it's still going to be in that student, like that's the market that they're appealing to it, you know, based on how the building's constructed, based on where it is. I mean, this is not necessarily unusual, like when we deal with other like with social housing, there's also those factors. Even if we're valuing it like a market apartment, we still consider the factors of its operation, and this type of property is very susceptible to external factors.
Okay, I think I'll just leave it right there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Merritt, questions for Ms. Cates?
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. So, Ms. Cates, you've come up to 54,727,000, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So from the original, you're up 1.5 million, correct?
Yes, it's higher than the original based on adding in the other income.
And you're still sticking with the 5.5% cap rate?
I am.
Okay, I thank you. And you're not in any disagreement in regards to the 60. You agree with the city?
Yes.
All right. I thank you very kindly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Schultz?
No questions, thank you.
Okay. I don't have any questions either, but I may once the city has presented. So Mr. Omachinsky or Mr. Brokus, go ahead, please.
Okay, yeah, so we'll continue on. We'll go to page 3. And just for the number of units, we got 219 bachelor units, 13 one-bedroom, 121 two-bedroom, and 15 four-bedroom for a total of 368 units. I think it was mentioned before that this is student housing, so the layout is a bit different. The average monthly rent per unit is $1,505.93. The gross potential rent, the model gross potential rent is $6,650,187. We're at a 3.1% vacancy. The effective gross income is $6,444,031. The expense rate is 41.93%, and the NOI is $3,742,049, with a capitalization rate of 4.8%, with the estimated market value at $77,959,000, and the market value per suite $211,845.11. I'll go to the next page, which is the market income for the subject property. Then we'll breeze past that to page 5 for the rent comparables. Mind you that all of these comparables are regular apartments. And the average year built is, or sorry, the range of year built for the comparables is 1977 to 2015. And the total number of units breakdown, comparable 4 share a similar amount of bachelor units, and then the latter 3 have a similar breakdown for the 1 and 2 bedroom units compared to the subject property. And then for the average monthly rent for the comparables, it's $1,323 at the low end to $2,015 at the high end. We'll go to the next page. That's that Winnipeg Regional Real Estate Board, the market insights that we spoke on before. And then we'll go to page 7. This is just comparable leases. But I know that the 60 is not being, CC60 is not being disputed. So we'll go to page 8, which is the capitalization rates information, and then the evidence on page 9. And then 10, we have the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. 11 to 13 is what we spoke on before. And then on 14 to 16, it's just there's no expenses reported. And then we have from 17, we have an aerial view and then exterior photos, and we'll look at the interior photos on 18, 19. And then we will go to page 20, which is the permit for constructing new apartments with a total project value of 60 million. Page after the interior and exterior alterations for the apartment, that is the date of May 12th. The construction value for that is 3 million. Then there's some more permits for the property, just from partial foundation permits, and that's on page 22. 23 is another aerial view. 24 is some information for the building itself, and then we can move down to page. Sorry, just one moment. There's just some more exterior photos for the latter pages. Then there's some layouts on page 33 to page 35. And then this is something that from 36 to 40, sorry, from 36 to the last page, there is a rent roll that was submitted. And at the bottom, the important thing to note is the reported potential rent is $557,045. You multiply that by 12, we come to $6,684,540, compared to our modeled potential rent, which is $6,650,187. That's our evidence. Thank you. Oh, I believe you're on mute. Sorry about that.
I am, thank you. I was sneezing, so thank you very much. Ms. Cates, questions for the assessor?
Yes, thank you. So for your rent comparables on page 5, under the subject column, where it shows gross floor area per unit 546, would that gross floor area also be including amenity space in the commercial space? So then the average actual unit size would be smaller than that?
That is correct.
And so in focusing on your newer comps, comps 1 and comp 2, the rents assigned to the subject are within that range, but the subject is, you know, half the size or less. So does that seem reasonable to you? Wouldn't larger units typically, all else equal, attain higher rents?
Yes, they definitely would. And I just, maybe something that to be cleared up a bit, is that we are looking at this as its purpose-built potential. Like, we feel it probably wouldn't be rented out as a normal apartment. Its current use would be its highest and best use based on its construction. So it is tough trying to find comparables in the city for rents, because I mean, this is like a one-off, right? So we're really putting more weight in regards to what they're reporting the potential as October 2022, when we did the request for income information when the building was being constructed. So you're right. These comps aren't the best because there are no good comps in the city for this kind of thing.
Yes, and I could definitely appreciate that, but when you look at these comps that are a lot larger and they're renting in the range of, let's say, 1,500 to 1,600, when you're then looking at this subject under appeal, would you not consider some sort of adjustment to the income that you're applying to the subject based on your review?
I wouldn't, because when you go down to their rent roll, like they have like multiple leases per unit, right? Like you can get multiple people like renting the beds in the unit. It's purpose built that way. So just when you're looking at their overall potential, they're saying, hey, our potential is 6,684,000 on page 51. We're looking at this as because it's purpose built, its highest and best use is its current use. If we were to try and value it as a market apartment, it wouldn't be its highest and best use. Whereby when you take a Manitoba Housing and we're like, oh, no, we're doing it as a market apartment. That's because Manitoba Housing, that's not the highest and best use. That's just an apartment that's being run for social housing. So it's kind of like two different things. We're like looking at the highest and best use based on its purpose-built nature. And so that's why we're putting weight on the actual potential, because there's no comparables.
But you didn't attempt to adjust the actual potential, given that those are based on furnished values, and we wouldn't typically use furnished values in a multifamily valuation.
Right, and that's a very fair comment, and I agree with that. And that's the difficulty when you have a property like this. So how much furniture, how much of a deduction for furniture do you need to put in there? It's kind of hard to quantify. You know, we're pretty far apart on valuation. We're at 210 a unit for these units. You're at like 150. New ones are renting out at like, there's selling anywhere between like 220 and 270. I think 210 is good. But your comments about the furniture are fair. That's the difficulty with this one.
But then when you're comparing it with what other units sell for, and they're completely different, they're not the same size, is that really a relevant comparison without making any adjustments? Because then you're kind of getting into direct comparison territory.
Yeah, definitely. It's like a one-off, and that's why we're trying to like value it like as is. And they're saying that the potential is 6,684,000. How much of that potential is influenced by the fact there's a bed and a nightstand in there? I don't know. Is it 25 million? Is that how much the difference is? I don't think so. So this one's hard to do, but we're taking what they're considering the potential is, and when we're looking at the model potential rent, it's close. There's not enough grounds for us to make a change.
Okay. Thank you very much. That would conclude my questions for this property.
Thank you very much. Ms. Schultz, questions for the assessor?
Yeah, page 51, you're looking at your total on your number of units at the bottom. Are you basing that on per bed? Because it's 368 suites in this unit, right? In this building, but you have occupied units of 382, unoccupied or vacant 187, giving me a total of 569. Is that based on a bed? Because
Yeah, I think like this is from them when they're, right after they constructed it, we put it on, we asked for information before we put it on.
Yeah.
Or system, so this is from them, so this might be like the total number
Bed.
of like, separate leases, because multiple leases
Right.
per unit based on the
So like a
bed.
4 unit could be 4
Yeah.
bed.
Or we have like a door counts. The
Okay.
door to get into the unit, and then it's just counted differently, that's all.
Because I'm just wondering, like, because I look at the very first page on page, where are we here? Sorry. There seems to be a lot of vacancy, so I'm just curious at your 3.1% vacancy. Is that sort of low based on what we're seeing here? Applicants using 5%
Yeah,
vacancy?
I mean, like it is. That would be like the modeled market vacancy, that would be like applied to like an apartment, right?
Right.
And like this thing is like a one-off, like
Unique.
it's not an apartment, it's a student housing, so that's like, that's a very good point.
Yeah.
Um,
No other student housing that's in that area of U of M, is there?
nothing like this, where it's like almost like a hotel dorm purpose-built thing.
Right.
So
Okay.
that's fair comment, for sure.
All my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Merritt.
I have none, Madam Chairperson. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Kate's summation?
I think I'm okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Omachinsky or Mr. Barocas, summation?
I think we've said enough. Just a quick break after this one would be great, thanks.
Okay. All right, so it is, let's have a quick break after this one. I would note that we've only gone through 2 items on our agenda, so we've got 5 more to go. And I appreciate the first 2 probably took the longest, but let's come back at 10:45 and we will break until then, and then we'll get going. Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting back to order. We're now dealing with item number 3 on our agenda, which is file number 24-3313. Mr. Omachinsky, when you're ready, please.
Thank you. This is file number 24-3313, roll number 03093014-785. The address is 425 Balatre Drive. The roll year is 2025, reference date April 1st, 2023. The assessed value for class 60 is $1,529,000, and for class 20 is $42,126,000, for a total assessment value of $43,655,000. There is 3 buildings, number of stories 1 to 6. The actual and effective year built is 2021 to 2023. There's 174 suites, 154 indoor parking spots, and 77 outdoor parking spots. We'll go to page 3, and then for number of units, we have 7 bachelor, 68 1-bedroom, 93 2-bedroom, and 6 3-bedroom for a total of 174 units. The average monthly rent per unit is $1,591.81. Gross potential rent for class 20 is $3,323,699. 3.1% vacancy rate. The effective gross income is $3,220,664. The expense rate is 37.87%. The net operating income is $2,999,000. The capitalization rate is 4.75%, and the estimated market value rounded is $42,126,000. The market value per suite is $242,103.45. And then for class 60, we have the gross potential rent of $82,848, vacancy rate of 6%, effective gross income of $77,877. The expense rate is at 3%. The net operating income is $73,395. The cap rate is 4.8%. The estimated market value is $1,529,000 market value per square foot is $341.98. Next page is the subject property market income. We'll go to page 5 for the comparables. All the comparables are Res App apartments. The effective year built ranges from 2018 to 2019 for the comparables. Total number of units range from 74 units to 208 units. And then we'll go to 1-bedroom units, which range from 20 to 74. 2-bedroom range from 31 to 134. 3-bedroom range from 0 to 24, and 4-bedroom range from 0 to 2. The average monthly rent per unit for the comparables range from 1,486 to 1,627. We'll go to the next page, to page 6. We already spoke about this. This is the Winnipeg Regional Real Estate Board, the 2022 Market Insights. We'll just point to the value per unit for those 3 properties. Then we'll go to comparable leases. The range of lease area for the comparable leases is 2,911 to 5,945 square feet. Effective year built ranges from 1989 to 2017, and the net rent per square foot is $14.79 to $25, or sorry, to $29.40 for the range. And the next page is the capitalization rates information, capitalization rates evidence, which I've already read in. The Municipal Assessment Act excerpts is page 10, and then we're going to 11, which is the permit for the construction of the building. The total project value is $35,410,000. Then we'll go to page 12, which is just a picture of the property itself with interior photos for the following couple pages up until page 15, which is the property summary with some information about the amenities for 425 Bellatrix Drive. And that is our presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Ms. Cates, questions for the assessor?
Yes, thank you. So just on the commercial valuation, so the subject cap rate is 4.8%, and per page 8, where you have your cap rate ranges, that would be below the 20th percentile of the OFS range. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And the broker reports are stated to further support the cap rates by the assessment department. Is that correct?
Let's see here. Yes, that cap does look like it is on the low side for sure.
Okay. That would conclude my question.
Thank you very much. Mr. Merritt?
I have none, Madam Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Schultz?
No questions at this time, thank you.
Okay. Okay, we'll move on to you, Ms. Cates.
Okay. So if you turn to page 2, we have a summary as well as our requested assessments. So on the commercial side, we are requesting an assessment of $1,176,000. And on the residential side, again, based on adding in parking income, I'll be revising my requested value for the residential side to a value of $40,055,000 rounded, so 40,055. If you go to page 6, we have our property site maps, and then some exterior photographs on page 7. Page 8, we have our property description. The subject property is located on Ballantrae Drive, south of Chevrier, near Newmarket in the Chevrier area. It is more specifically known as the Refinery District. The property consists of a 6-story apartment, and then there is also main floor commercial. If you turn to page 13, we have the overview of our income approach. So we are going to be using potential market gross rents of $3,127,992 per the chart in our analysis. And then I'm also going to be adding in, we're using a market vacancy of 3.1%, and I'll be adding in parking income. So parking income will be a value of $194,040, so 194,040, and that's based on 154 indoor parking stalls at $80 per stall per month, and 77 outdoor parking stalls at $50 per stall per month. So that would give an effective gross income of $3,225,064. Total expenses, we're applying a market expense ratio of 37.9%, undisputed, and that works out to a dollar value of $1,222,299. We have a net operating income of $2,002,765. So it's really just a cap rate dispute. So again, NOI is 2,002,765, and with a 5% cap rate gives an indicated value of $40,055,000 rounded. Turning,
Can I just repeat those numbers, please?
yes,
So you're adding parking income of $194,040, 194,040.
yes,
New EGI of 3225064.
yes,
Expenses of 37.9, which works out to 1,222,299.
yes,
NOI 2,002,765.
yes.
5% cap for a market value of 4,055.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
And then just turning to the commercial component of the valuation, if you turn to page 17, we have an overview. So realistically, for this property as a res-am, we would typically value the main floor as just pure retail space, given that the purpose of these is typically to provide services to tenants or people in surrounding areas. You wouldn't typically have a pure office tenant in there, aside from service-based, medical office, et cetera. But just given that the city's valuing it as office, we're just staying true to that in our analysis as well. So in terms of the rents that we're applying, we've searched the market for some rent comparables. We've found rents, Pembina Highway, the 2000 block. It's about 5 to 10 minutes away from the subject, and they range from about $20 per square foot to $26 per square foot. But given that the subject does not experience as much exposure as the comparables, nor is it anchored by other retail tenants to draw people in, we're going to use a rent at the lower end of the spectrum of $20 per square foot. We're applying market allowances for vacancy at 6%, shortfall at $8 per square foot, non-recovered expenses at 3%. And then we're going to be applying a cap rate of 6.75. You'll note from our cap rate chart on the top of page 19 that 6.75 is at the higher end of the office suburban A and the lower end of office suburban B, which we feel is a good fit for the subject property to more accurately capture the risk, given that it isn't the highest quality space. It is new, but it is kind of off the path, and it's on the main floor of an apartment. So we feel comfortable at 6.75 to more accurately capture the risk. We have our commercial valuation summary on page 20, and this shows how we arrive at our value of $1,176,000 rounded. We have an appendix on page 23. I've included some marketing photos, as well as the city valuation for the property. And that would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cates. Mr. Omachinsky or Mr. Brokus, questions?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Schultz, do you have questions for Ms. Cates?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Merritt.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Just briefly, Ms. Cates, by adding the laundry and parking, increase the value you know, from your original by $2.5 million.
To clarify, no laundry here, just parking, because these
Just
suites
parking?
typically have,
Okay,
these suites
sorry.
typically have their own
Yeah.
in-suite laundry for these new
Okay.
properties, but yes, adding in the
but-
parking, I felt
yeah,
was more
Yeah,
accurate.
but how, you do a presentation and then you suddenly increase the value for your property, for the apartment of $2.5 million.
I agree, it's not ideal. I would have preferred to have it in the submission,
Mhm,
but
mhm, mhm.
just to be frank, it was a bit of an oversight at the time of submission. So
Okay,
I'm verbally correcting.
okay. I thank you. I have no further questions, Madam Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no questions either, so I'll just comment for the record that the rebuttal presented earlier will stand for both of these, for both of you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's move to item number 4. Ms. Cates, did you want to make a comment on this first before we begin?
Yes, I intend to confirm the assessment for section 54(1) of the Municipal Assessment Act.
Okay, so Mr. Assessor, could you please take us quickly through this property? But you need to still go over your valuation, class 20 and class 60, please.
Yes, thank you. I'll just do this quick. 24-3289, roll number 0309-300, 5480-3435 Pembina Highway. It's a Res M2 classifications. Total value is $9,300,000. The apartment component, residential 2, $8,956,000. The 60 other commercial, 354,000. Both are taxable. That's our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cates,
No questions.
thank you. Mr. Merritt,
I have none, thank you.
thank you. Ms. Schultz,
No questions, thank you.
okay, and nor do I, so Ms. Cates.
I'll do
You could just again state for the record, please.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to request a confirmation of the assessment pending further review per section 54(1) of the Municipal Assessment Act. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barocas or Mr. Omachinsky? Comments, questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schultz.
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Merritt?
I have none, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that, everyone. Okay, let's move on to item number 5. File number 24-2817. Mr. Omachinsky, Mr. Barocas.
Thank you very much. I'll actually do this one. I looked it over. We're going to make a verbal rec on it.
Okay.
It may be a bit smoother because I did the analysis. So file 24-2817, roll number 0307-087-5000, 1355 Pembina Highway. The original model assessment was $2,069,000. 2 lines of classified value. It's an apartment with commercial on the main floor. So $1,119,000 for the apartment component, $950,000 for the CC 60 commercial component, both fully taxable. This was the original model valuation. There's 3 stories, 2014, 8 suites, 12 outdoor parking. So we're going to make a recommendation on this. I spent a while looking over the applicant's brief. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the first the class code 20. We're going to use the applicant's net operating income of 40,000. 945. And we're going to bump the cap up a bit to 4.5. I think the modeled cap is a bit aggressive at 4.35. And I bumped it to 4.5 because it is a smaller, more accessible price point. So there'd be a higher proportion of potential purchasers. So that's why it's below the 4.75. So that results in a total valuation of 910,000 for CC20. So basically Farah's income and expenses and net operating income, and then I bumped our cap.
Okay, just to clarify, in looking at Ms. Cates's presentation, there is a slightly different NOI from what you mentioned.
Oh, is there?
We have 40,248. Ms. Cates, can you confirm that?
Yeah, you're that would be correct. Okay, so let me revise that. I guess I made a little typo, unfortunately. So 40,248. So that's 894,000 rounded is the new valuation using that 40,248.
894 rounded.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so that's the class code 20.
Yeah, and then on the commercial, what we're gonna do, we're gonna make a recommendation actually as well. Sorry, I'm on a different brief right now. Okay, so we're gonna make a recommendation right now as well, using her net operating income of 49,806 total, and we're gonna bump the cap to 6%. I think that like based on the location, that the caps that the model cranked out at 4 and 4.35 are too low, and so it shows 6. Or rather 4 and 4.15 are too low, and it shows 6 because when I go to page 7, and I'm looking at the, like suburban A, suburban B range for office, 4.25 to 6.75. I think we're too far outside the range, so I chose more of a middle ground to apply to the commercial. So that results in a valuation of 830,000 rounded. And so the total recommendation is $1,740,000 rounded, yeah.
Okay, so I need to go through those numbers.
Oh, no, sorry.
They add up to something different.
Right. Okay. So the last one actually changes because I forgot that I changed that. I'll just give you a revised total. Okay. So it is, what is 894, 400, or 890, just put 894. Mackenzie?
Yeah.
And then it is 830. So sorry, it's 1,724,000 total.
Okay, so I'll just go over that class code 60. You're using Ms. Cates's NOI at 49,806, capped at 6% for a market value of 830,000.
Yes.
And with the class code 20 piece, your revised total assessment, 1,724,000. Miss Cates, what do you think about that?
Just hearing it now, it seems pretty reasonable. The overall values, not necessarily all the parameters. So I guess I would like to accept conditionally upon just getting sign off from the owner once the order comes out.
Okay, I hear you. Okay, thank you. Mr. Merritt, questions?
I have none, thank you.
Ms. Schultz, questions?
No questions.
Okay, Ms. Cates, then, would you like to go through your presentation? I guess we're probably good on everything. If you'd like to focus on CAP.
Did you want me to still
Well,
proceed?
you haven't really accepted the recommendation for our purposes. We need to make a decision after this hearing, right?
Okay, well, I accept the recommendation
Okay,
as stated,
as presented, okay.
yes.
Okay, thank you. That concludes item number 5. Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 6, file number 24-1353, 380 Osborne. Mr. Omachinsky or Mr. Barocas?
Thank you. File number 24-1353. Roll number is 12097505500. The address is 380 Osborne Street. Roll year is 2025, reference date April 2023. The assessed value for classification 60 taxable is 691,000. The assessed value for classification 20 taxable is 18,280,000. For a total assessed value of 18,971,000. There is the number of buildings is 1. There is 7 stories. The actual and effective year built is 2019. There is 72 suites and 70 indoor parking spots. We'll move to page 3. The number of units, we have 48 one-bedroom units, 24 two-bedroom, and for a total of 72 units. And the average monthly rent per unit is $1,727.70. For class 20, the gross potential rent is $1,492,733. The vacancy rate is 3.2%. The effective gross income is $1,444,966. The expense rate is 39.91%. Net operating income is $868,280. The cap is 4.75% for an estimated market value rounded of $18,280,000. The market value per suite comes in at $253,888.89. And for class 60, we have the gross potential rent of $40,393, vacancy rate of 5%. Effective gross income of $38,373. The expense rate is 3%. The net operating income is $36,646. The capitalization rate is 5.3%. The estimated market value is $691,000, and the market value per square foot would be $419.55. We'll go then to page 5 to look at our comparables. And comparable 1 shares the Res AM parcel. The latter 3 comparables are Res App apartment. Effective year built ranges from 2018 to 2021. The unit breakdown is all generally similar to the subject property. The range for the average monthly rent per unit ranges from $1,408 to $1,744. We will go to page 6, which is the reported financials review for April 2023. Okay, yeah, so the EGI, the reported actual is $1,392,371.95 compared to the model at $1,444,000, $1,444,966. Operating expenses reported And then you can see the less tax, less appeals, less management values. And then the amended OPX, the admin in general for reported actuals for the total expenses of $481,000, $481,703.42 compared to the model of $576,000, $576,686. The NOI for actuals is $910,668, and then the model is $868,280. The cap rate for reported actuals is the same, and the market value for actual compared to model is slightly higher at $19,171,969.11. Then we'll go to page 7. There's just comparable leases, which range from a leased area per square foot of 741 to 1,386. The effective year built ranges from 1975 to 1984, and the net rent per square foot ranges from $20 to $25. Page 8 and 9, 8 is the cap information, and then there's the capitalization rate evidence on 9, the market insights on 10, municipal assessment act excerpts on 11, and then 12 we have a permit for the construction of the property with the total project value of 14 million. And then 13 is just it on Google Maps, and then exterior view, and then there's interior photos that follow until page 16, and then there's an income statement lastly from 17 and 18. That is our presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Omachinski. Ms. Cates, questions for the assessor?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Merritt.
Did you get a chance to inspect the property at all?
We have not.
So I note that there is 70 indoor parking. So is there any surface parking, or is it everything indoor, or is it outdoor?
We, as per the inventory in our system, it looks like it's all indoor parking. Let me look at the pictures if there's anything we might have missed. And as far as we know, it's all indoor.
So this was built in 2019. And I noticed that there was a sale, and I would assume it's probably the land, in 2018 of $1,392,000. So, and the permit value for the construction is 14 million. So, would you say that the total involvement dollar-wise, based on these figures, is about 15.4?
Yeah, that would be correct as stated on the total project value and the land sale.
And you're coming in with a model cap rate of 4.75.
That is correct.
And on the retail, on the 60, it is 5.3, correct?
That's correct.
All right. I have no further questions, Madam Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Schultz?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. I did have a question on your page 6. So this is for the year ending of 2022?
This is April 2023.
Okay.
And,
So it's a part year or what?
Well, it's from, if you look at the mailer at the end of the brief, it's May 22.
Okay,
So I guess that would be like May 1st to
okay,
April.
okay.
yeah.
So it's a May to April,
It'll
to
be,
April,
yeah, it'll be a full year.
a full year.
Mhm.
Okay, and this is only the class 20 portion.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what part of the confusion is with this one. Is that the income and expenses would be combined. So, I mean, really this page 6, I would like to clarify that that's not what we're putting the weight of our analysis on. We're just going by model. I know there's something to do with like tax arrears, because I know the property was supped in 2022. Just trying to sort that out, actually last night. And I couldn't quite get a handle what the actual taxes ought to have been. I know Farah did a recalc in her workup. She might be able to talk about that as well. But we're leaning on the model with this one based on the comparables, both commercial and residential.
Okay, so, but just to clarify, going back, this is everything? This is the whole property? I know you're not relying on it, but you are
Yeah.
using it to support your model. Otherwise you wouldn't have it in here. So
Right.
you're using it to support the entire, it looks like just the class 20 piece.
Yeah, and you know what? I think that's something I would actually, with more time to reflect after we've hit the due date on this property. When expenses like this are combined and you have gross leases in place, the problem is when you go and you strip out, you turn the leases from gross to net and you assess the commercial as net, you would also have to somehow be able to remove those commercial expenses from the total expenses listed. And since they're not broken apart, actually, we shouldn't be using this income and expense mailer at all. So I would actually ask the board at this point to not put any weight on our page 6, because there's no way to separate the commercial from the actual based on the information that we received. Commercial from the residential based on the information that we received.
All right. Okay, I have no additional questions. Miss Cates.
Thank you. So if you turn to page 2, we have a requested assessment on the class code 20 of 16,013,000 and on the class code 60 of $490,000. I did visit the property in this past summer, and I've included some photos in the appendix for review. Page 6, we have the property site map, so aerial map view and Google map view. So to address the question about surface parking, you'll see that the building is pretty much maxed out on the parcel, so there is no surface parking. The only parking is indoor/underground. And then an exterior photo on page 7. Page 8, property description. The subject property is located on the east side of Osborne at its intersections with Dawn Avenue in the Riverview area. The property is 7 stories, 72 units, 48 1-bedrooms and 24 2-bedrooms. There are 70 indoor parking stalls, and there is main floor retail space. If you turn to page 13 for an overview of our income approach, we are disputing the rents. I've included the CMHC rents as a reference point, but what I would note with this property is that even at lower rent levels than what CMHC is saying, they still had a high vacancy of 10%. So based on that, I'm not going to move to the CMHC rents because even at the lower level, they still were having vacancy problems. So I'm going to use the potential rent based on the 2022 rent roll of $1,161,900, which works out to $13.45 per unit. We are using market vacancy 3.2% SSS to capture the long-term vacancy that you'd expect at a property. Expense allowance, we have reviewed the expenses. We are using expense allowance of 40.4%, which is a dollar value of $542,669. And then if you turn to page 14 for our overview of the cap rate, we are again applying a cap rate of 5%. I would note that this property, while the units are fairly modern, it doesn't have all the typical tenant amenities that you would typically see at other new builds. So we're not doing any type of adjustment or anything, but it is worth noting. If you turn to page 16, we have our valuation breakdown. So once adding in other forms of income to the potential gross rents, we get an effective gross income of $1,343,331. We have the expenses here. I would like to note that the expense statements seem a bit light in certain areas. So for one, based on the expense statement we reviewed, it didn't have anything listed for insurance. So that could be potentially maybe a case of the owner maybe paying it or dealing with that outside of property management. But that would be atypical. And then as well, the taxes they report were a bit light. So we've recalculated 2022 taxes and then assuming for the rebate. So that gives us a net operating income of $800,662 with a 5% cap rate, or a residential value of $16,013,000 rounded. I'll just move to the commercial valuation on page 18. So it is main floor retail space. You'll see the middle of the page. There are 2 units at the property. One was leased up just kind of approaching the reference date at $23 a square foot net. So what I've done is I've applied that same rate to the other unit as well, since it was not leased up at that time. We're applying market allowances for vacancy at 5%, shortfall $7 a square foot, non-recoverable at 3%. And then we are going to use a cap rate, if you follow me to page 20, of 7%. So you'll see at the top of page 20, 7% would be the high end of retail top quality or the lower end of retail standard. When we're looking at retail properties, in terms of what type of cap rate should be applied, it's not like the age would only be considered one factor. What really is a big determinant for retail properties is if you have other tenants that are anchoring, bringing people in. So when you see retail strips that are anchored by grocery stores or like a Shoppers or something like that, some sort of pharmacy, that's going to draw more people in. So those would be considered to be lower on the risk scale. But when you're looking at something like this, main floor of an apartment, one of them is kind of off to the side. So one of them is more visible from Osborne. The bakery is a bit more off to the side at the intersection with the other street. So I feel 7% still capturing that it's new by being in the top quality bracket, but higher end. And then you'll see how that works out on the summary on page 21. And that supports our value of $490,000 rounded. The appendix starts on page 24. And so I've included some site visit photos. So it starts with common area, and then you'll see the interior of the units. Everything is concrete. So kind of interesting. The appliances are modern, what we'd expect for a new apartment. Units have balconies. And there's just some photos here for your view. The building is pet friendly, so they do have a like dog wash area, page 37 in the underground parking space. And really, when I asked to see common area, the only common area they had, page 39, is just the lobby. So there's not like a fitness facility or social room or other type of common area we might expect. And then the financials just follow. And that would conclude my presentation on this property.
Thank you, Ms. Cates. Mr. Omachinsky, Mr. Barocas, questions for Ms. Cates?
Yeah, just a few. On page 42. That's the income statement. This is where the numbers in your page 16, this is where they came from. This is the source.
Yeah, end of year December 22. There was a note in our file that the end of year 2021, that the 2021 info wasn't necessarily a full year. So that's why I didn't include the 2021 in the spreadsheet.
Okay. So is this combined commercial and residential?
Typically, the statements would combine both, but in terms of the status of the commercial space in 2022, there was no tenants in place then. So I'm not sure if it was fitted up at that point or if it was just more shell space. So yeah, but I mean, typically the statements would be combining, but I'm not entirely sure how to allocate that out here, given the timing of the tenants moving in and whether everything was ready to go for them and the cost that would go toward that portion.
Okay, right. Because I see on 41, there's a bakery that looks like it got in there just before the reference dates.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
In your opinion, would Osborne Village be a good neighborhood for kind of like a street level retail location in terms of tenant attractiveness?
Yes, location's good.
Okay. Those are our questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Schultz, questions?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt?
I have none. Thank you kindly.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Cates, is this considered Osborne Village? I note that it's south of the Confusion Corner underpass area.
I believe it would more so be considered South Osborne, but I would consider South Osborne to be desirable. But I don't know if it would be Osborne Village at that point. I think it would be like South Osborne area.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. And you have the same issue as Mr. Barocas and Mr. Omachinsky in the sense that you can't allocate the commercial versus the class code 20 expenses, but you said that there was not a commercial tenant.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So typically we would be able to do some sort of allocation, but given the timing of when the tenants moved in and the timing of this 2022 year, I'm not sure offhand whether that space was even fitted up for the tenants at that point. So I don't know how much commercial costs there would have been in 2022 because the lease just came in. Like when I asked them, the owner, for different lease dates, I said, do you have anything end of 22? They said they didn't have any tenants at end of 22. They only had one move in effective for March 23. So for this one, I'm not sure how much commercial expense there would be at this stage.
Okay. So then it would be safe to say that most of this statement really does reflect the class code 20 piece?
I believe it does.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, thank you. I have no additional questions. And again, I'm just confirming that the rebuttal evidence that we've heard before applies to this property also.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That can, summation. Mr. Barocas, Mr. Omachinsky.
No summation, thank you.
Ms. Cates.
I'm good as well, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, let's move to the final item on our agenda, file number 24-3664717 Osborne Street. Mr. Omachinsky.
Thank you. File number is 24-3664. Roll number is 12003553000. The address is 717 Osborne Street. The roll year 2025, reference date April 1st, 2023. The assessed value for class 60 taxable is 1,509,000. And then for class 20, res 2 taxable is 2,875,000 for a total assessed value of $4,384,000. Number of buildings, one, there's 3 stories. The actual and effective year built is 1911. There is 20 suites and 10 outdoor parking spots. We'll go to page 3 for number of units. We have 9 1-bedroom and 11 2-bedroom for a total of 20 units. And the average monthly rent per unit comes in at $1,197.43. For class 20 or CC 20, we have the gross potential rent of $287,383. Vacancy rate of 3.2%, effective gross income of $278,000, $187, and then the expense rate is 47.29%. The NOI is $146,632. The capitalization rate is 5.1%. The estimated market value would be $2,875,000, with the market value per suite at $143,750. Then for the retail, the gross potential rent is $74,566 at a vacancy rate of 5%. The effective gross income is $70,838. The expense rate is 3%. The NOI is $66,946. The capitalization rate is 7.15%. The estimated market value rounded is $936,000. And then for the restaurant, CC 60, it's gross potential rent of $45,163. Vacancy rate of 4%. The effective gross income is $43,356. Expense rate 3%. The NOI $40,000, 381. Cap rate is 7.05%, and then the market value rounded is $573,000. We'll scroll down to page 5 with the rent comparables. The rents, all the comparables are res app apartments. The effective year built ranges from 1913 to 1928. The breakdown of units is similar to the subject property, and we have an average monthly rent per unit ranging from $988 to $1,277. We'll go to page 6. This is the comparable leases. This has a range of 825 square feet to 2,660 square feet. The effective year built ranges from 1959 to 2017, and then the rent per square foot ranges from $19 to $27.26. Then we have the capitalization rate information, the evidence, and then on page 8, and then Municipal Act excerpts on 9. And then page 10, we have just the photo of the exterior of the building and then the location. Page 11, there is just some information about renovated 1- and 2-bedroom apartments located. Yeah, same address. And then all suites are renovated with new cabinets, hardwood flooring, stainless steel appliances. Then there's some additional photos of the interior of the property, and that goes until page 16. And then there is a income statement, and that would be the presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Omachinski. Ms. Cates, questions for the assessor?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Merritt.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Assessor, this building was built in 1911?
Yes, that is correct. That's what we have on file.
So I noticed that there's reds in the suites. So is that hot water heat to the building?
Let's see here. I believe so, yes.
So there would be a boiler in the basement?
I haven't inspected it, but I suppose there would be if that was true. It's not like forced air
Okay.
or or it's not baseboard or forced air. It's some kind of like either hot water or steam heat. I don't know which though.
Okay. So if it was built in 1911, does it have heritage status at all? You know?
I do not know actually.
Okay. But you haven't inspected the property at all?
No, like we have these pictures from a leasing ad on page 11. It says 465 Beresford. That's just like a sub address. It's the same property. And it looks like they have done some refreshing that's not 1911. And they would have an effective age on it. Might need one, to be honest, based on the pictures that I'm seeing.
So you're using a cap rate, a low cap rate of 5.10, which for a property that was built in 1911.
Yeah, that's the cap. And when we're looking at the pictures, I mean, if this was completely, maybe if it was like 1975 in there, despite it being on Osborne, which is an attractive rental spot, I would consider bumping it. But when you look at ultimately at our valuation on a price per unit basis, yeah, it's only got 20 units and 143.7 for Osborne. You get a suite like this. I think we're okay.
All right. I thank you very kindly. Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Merritt. Ms. Schultz, questions for the assessors?
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kate.
Thank you. So I'll just jump ahead to page 6. We have our property maps and then some exterior photos on page 7. Property description on page 8. So the subject is on the west side of Osborne at its intersection with Beresford Avenue in the Lord Roberts area. It is a 3-story apartment built in 1911. 20 units, which include 9 one-bedrooms and 11 two-bedrooms, and there are 10 service parking stalls noted. There is main floor retail space. If you turn to page 13, we have the overview of our income approach. So we're using an effective gross rent of $266,532 based on the actual stabilized income. So that's inclusive of vacancy allowance, so we're not adding an additional vacancy allowance. In light of the previous discussion on the prior property about breaking out expenses and such like that, if you turn to page 16, just due to that and the amount of commercial space here, I will just do an adjustment to our expenses just to reflect just the residential portion. So I'll just go through that. So we're using an effective gross income of $274,463. Just for simplicity's sake, we'll apply the model expense ratio of 47.3%, which works out to a dollar value of $129,821. Gives a net operating income of $144,642. And we are applying a 6.25% cap rate, which would give a rounded value for the residential portion of $2,314,000. So that's 2,314. In regard to the property and potential renovations, a property that's built in 1911, the structure, the foundation, the important elements of the property are still true to 1911, even if you upgrade the suites. So while I wouldn't suggest that the suites are true to 1900 in terms of their finishes, the building and the structure is. So in this concept of effective age, whether it should be or shouldn't be, we wouldn't agree to it, or we would dispute it for this property, just given how old it is. Something built in 1911, it can't just be called 1975. It just wouldn't make sense unless you're doing a lot to the actual structure. So for that reason, we're still sticking in our cap rate category as stated in our brief. For properties older than the 40s, we're going 6.1 to 6.6. We're at a 6.25% on the lower end of the range for this property specifically. Then I'll just go through. We have repair and maintenance broken out on page 17. And then in terms of the commercial valuation, starts on page 18. We've gone through, taken a look at the rents. It looked like a lot of the rents of the property were gross. So what we've done is we've also taken a look at rent comparables on page 19. But for the purpose of the analysis, we're not disputing the rents. The only dispute on the commercial would be the cap rate. Given the features of the property, the older age, we're applying a higher cap rate at 7.5% to the property. That would be within the range of retail standard quality, which I think fits for this property with this characteristics. Our valuation breakdowns on page 21, where you can see the value of for the retail 936,000. For the retail 678,000, and then for the restaurant 787,000. And then the appendix starts on page 23, and we have the financials and other things that we've considered. And that would conclude my presentation on this property. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cates. Mr. Omachinsky, Mr. Barocas, questions for Ms. Cates?
Yeah, just a couple. On page 14, you said that the base cap rate starts at 610. Is that based on the sales cap rate study?
Based on our cap rate chart here, but it is also supported by the sales in our cap rate study. The property at Maryland is an older building, was built in 1913, and that has a cap rate beyond 6%. Granted, Maryland is in a inferior location to the subject, so it makes sense that subject cap rate doesn't go as high as that. But yeah, I believe it will be supported by our cap rate sales as well.
Okay. And just like on your chart here, like I know you get, does Altus ever make adjustments downwards based on better than market norms, like for location, or if there's a strong demand for the property? Do you guys ever adjust the cap rate down or just up?
It's a good question. So in terms of when we're looking at good locations or good properties, our base cap rates are already contemplating good quality properties in good locations. So we're not typically going to do a further adjustment to that. But like I mentioned earlier in the presentation, we're talking about newer properties with a cap rate of 5. And I was saying that, some you could go, a bit lower if it's like the absolute best. So it's not that we'd never consider an adjustment down. It's just in terms of good quality or good location, we feel it's already captured in the base. But I know there are specific scenarios where we might consider a downward adjustment.
Okay, and then just on Maryland, just to be clear, that stabilized cap rate is based on 1 year of income and an estimate of effective gross income, like 130,000 more than they're actually reporting. Would that be fair to say on page 15 of your cap rate study?
Yes, but just to give a bit of further context to Maryland, that property is struggled. It sold, 3 times within the last 10 years or so, and it keeps selling at a declining price. So in terms of trying to piece together more years of data, it's a bit hard when different purchasers have different year-end dates and could be a bit scattered. But in terms of the actual stabilization, I feel comfortable with what we did. At the time of purchase, the property was suffering from quite a bit of vacancy, but in our view, no purchaser would buy something expecting to run it at 50% vacancy. So like you do have to project in that sense. So what we've included for Maryland is the information that the purchaser had. When I reached out to him, he gave me the rent roll and the income statement that the prior owner gave to him. So we were using those as our foundation for what might he have assumed. So I guess to sum up, yes, factually what you're saying is true, but I don't believe it's an improper stabilization or anything like that.
Okay, thank you very much. Those are our questions.
Thank you very much. Ms. Schultz, questions for Ms. Cates?
No questions at this time, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. And again, the rebuttal evidence that was presented previously stands for both of these this property?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Barocas, Mr. Omachinsky, summation?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cates?
I'm good as well, thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I think then that concludes item number 7. So I'd like to thank the assessors and the applicant for their presentations today. And we've heard all of the items now, so this hearing is now adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.